Welcome to Soul Elevation, guiding your ascension to new heights. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and I was so very honored to have Doctors JJ and Desiree Hurtak on today's episode. Their work has been remarkably meaningful in my own life. I share in the interview about an astral experience I had a couple of nights ago that's centered around my connection with them. I've been deeply moved by their music and books, and I highly encourage you to check out their work at keysofenoch.org. Dr. JJ Hurtak is the founder of the Academy for Future Science, a global NGO advancing consciousness and sustainability. A scholar with 2 PhDs and author of the Keys of Enoch, he's worked with NASA, contributed to major archaeological discoveries such as the Tomb of Osiris, and is a pioneer in remote sensing, space law, and spiritual science. His global work spans science, spirituality, media, and the arts. And Dr. Desiree Hurtak is a futurist, social scientist, and co-founder of the Academy for Future Science. She works globally with indigenous communities, interfaith groups, and environmental causes. Co-author of Oversoul Awakening, she's helped uncover key archaeological sites and produced award-winning media, exploring the fusion of science, consciousness, and human potential. Before we dive into this episode, I want to invite you to explore the beautiful array of resources awaiting you at karagoodwin.com. From my book, Your Authentic Awakening, to powerful free meditations, my Learn to Meditate course, and even personalized guided meditations crafted just for you, there's something there to support you no matter where you are on your spiritual path. You can also sign up for my upcoming summits and workshops to connect with like-hearted souls and expand your consciousness in real time. And now enjoy this episode.
Dr. JJ and Dr. Desiree are pleased to be with you and your audience.
Well, I'm so excited to have you both here. I'm really honored, and I've been looking forward to this. I so appreciate you both being here. I appreciate the flexibility that you've already shown in our interactions. Let's start by you sharing how your spiritual journey began. You have such a unique story about how all of this has come. You have decades of experience. How did you come to study consciousness and the overself in the metaphysical realms?
Well, thank you for inviting us on your program. I was a young scholar interested in Egypt, and I made an opportunity work where I could study Coptic documents back in the 1960s. That's a long time ago. But I was impressed with the sounds that the Egyptians used in their liturgy. And I figured there was probably some musical connection with the pyramids of Egypt that wasn't understood properly. Later, I received my education with Mircea Eliade, the great scholar of Sanskrit texts at the University of Chicago, and then at the University of California, where I officially wrote my dissertation on the language of secrecy, which illustrates certain sound techniques. Anyway, moving quickly into the 1970s as a young faculty member at the Disney Corporation called CalArts, California Institute of the Arts, I had an exceptional experience because my students were rather interested in why there are avatars, and is there music, is there a connection with higher intelligence? And so I began to experiment with the various energy mantras, not only from India and Egypt, but also the biblical mantras of the Psalms and the New Testament. And I was able to bring together a very unique synthesis. And I opened a morphogenic field of consciousness where I suddenly went into another dimension. And that was the beginning of a journey which led to the Book of Knowledge, Keys of Enoch, which, of course, as you know, has been in more than 30 languages. Essentially, the Keys of Enoch tell us we are in a schoolhouse called Mother Earth. It's a schoolhouse of training using sacred art, sacred music, sacred knowledge, connected with the human heart that allows us to connect with cosmic intelligence.
Right. But today we were going to talk about a book we did off of, in other words, connected with the Keys of Enoch. But people say, oh, what's the basis of it? You know, what's the information in a nutshell? So we came together and put out this book called Oversoul Awakening, which we felt is great for your work with soul elevation in that sense. And so what it does is it's 72 chapters, and they're all really short, to awaken the soul. So it starts with the very first steps towards initiation. So there's always a beginning. And 72, of course, is a sacred number. You double that, you get 144. Because in Dr. Hurtak's experience, it's not extraterrestrial, and it's also not channeling. And we like to emphasize that at the very beginning, because the idea behind it was he actually in a pillar of light saw the being called Enoch, who appeared to him, asked him if he was ready. And then when he said he was, and that's different from any kind of ET abductions that just take you, then he actually went into these different realms, first with his physical body, later with his spiritual body, where he connected with what people call Metatron.
The very first was the musical linguistics that activated a morphogenic field, which my consciousness passed into. I was then biolocated by a being of light into a higher dimension, and still that was not sufficient to go even to a higher level. My spiritual body was then taken from my higher body that was in some other dimension, and I had the opportunity to hear these beautiful sounds. At that time, this was now before we used computers, everything in the keys was basically without computer processing. But in Silicon Valley, we had the opportunity, with Desiree's background in art and music, the opportunity to illustrate this more definitively in this book called
Oversoul Awakening. So
as you can see
actually,
on the cover.
The subtitle is a guide for the schoolhouse of the soul. And we did do this together because a lot of people were asking us some basic questions. Anyway, so Kara, what do you feel? I know you haven't really seen it yet, so maybe this book.
Well, yes, exactly, because I have been really devouring the 7th book of the Keys of Enoch, and the pictures have just been beautiful, and they've been so it's been very synchronistic as I've been reading it. I'm curious, the music keeps coming up, and then we're talking about layers of the soul. So I've heard you say the overself, I've heard you say your spiritual self, the physical body. Can you talk a little bit about those layers, and is there a relation to octaves with music?
Well, in a certain sense, and I think you see this in near-death experiences as well, that basically when people go into the near-death experience, they kind of go into this like higher state of consciousness. And then there's a being that usually says, well, you haven't finished what you're doing, go back. But the real question is, are they going back only to hear and they leave where they are, or is there still that connection to the higher realm? So this is kind of what we're talking about in terms of Oversoul Awakening. This is one of our first pictures that I'll show you. So we actually see ourselves as down here in the small presence, but really we are part of a greater presence.
And note that the female face is closed. The mouth is closed because this illustrates the inner mothering nature of the divine self. 8 scholars that we work with, including Morton Subotnick, the father of electronic music, Ravi Shankar, the great sitar specialist from India, even Carlos Santana, the great maestro of contemporary music, have used our techniques of realizing it's the right hemisphere, the female within, that has to be awakened. Until that time, our mouth is closed, as if a cloth was placed over our inner spiritual nature, which is basically feminine. And if you go back to ancient scripture, whether it's the Hebraic or the early Proto-Christian and the Coptic and the Greek, or even in the Sanskrit tradition, there is an emphasis on ascension processes. In fact, Psalm 120 to 134 are the Psalms of Ascent, suggesting that the ancient writers knew that one had to be in marriage of the bride. One had to open up the resources of the creative, the multidimensional side of the brain, which is the female.
Right. But getting back to sound, I mean, we clearly are vibrating at a certain frequency here, a third and fourth dimension. Our good friend Elizabeth Satori, who recently passed away, said it's like a musical keyboard. We're here, you know, the lower notes, so to speak, and then you go up into the higher frequencies, the higher notes. And that's really still part of ourselves. So we really do feel that we're not into the incarnation thing, like we're here now, then we wait 7 years or we pop into another body. There's much more behind us. There's much more of who we are that also is connected to these higher realms. And we call it like an Eka body. It's just an ancient term that, and also a term that was used now recently in science. And the idea is that we can be here now, but we can also be like 1,000 years in the past, because time doesn't have that relevance, and we can be on another planet. So there's all different aspects of ourselves. And that's why, like when you call upon, let's say everyone wants to call upon Archangel Michael for protection. And I think that's a great idea in the face of everything happening on this planet right now. But what does Michael do? Okay, you take Michael, he's up there, right? Maybe even on a horse with a sword, whatever you visualize him. But if you call upon him, and people start thinking, oh my gosh, you know, I don't want to bother Michael. He has like the whole world to deal with. Right? You know, that's not how it works. Basically, he himself has like the hands of Kuan Yin, you know, 1,000, 10,000, 10 million, whatever possibilities of expressing himself or emanating himself. And that's a good term, emanating to anyone who calls upon him. So it's not like you're never bothering Michael. Okay. Just want to get that across to your audience, right? You're never bothering Michael. He actually wants to know he can protect you, and then he'll do it. So it's just that kind of
So
idea.
there is a science of sound. There is a level of consciousness that can be achieved behind these archetypal symbols. And that's what is said. If you read between the text, the Bible within the Bible is a musical statement of a higher level of utilizing the body, which is a musical instrument, to tune into the chakras or the energy fields, and thus activate both sides of the brain, the left and right, the left being the analytical side, the right being the musical, metaphysical, feminine. And in so doing, you activate what is called the overself, or the higher self. The putting on the mind of Christ, to use New Testament terminology, or the understanding of the higher Zohar, the body of illumination, or what the avatars speak of in the Sanskrit text, the understanding of the cosmic trikya, the threefold nature, is in essence a synthesis of vibration.
But we would say that overself is always there. Like the soul, you know, is always there. But ultimately, we have cut ourselves off from that higher reality. That's why the first step in our book is really towards initiation to understand that we are connected to a higher presence of who we are.
And our book works with pictures, as seen now behind you on the wall there. Sacred geometry.
In your picture.
Sacred geometry is very important in illustrating how the mind comes together on different chakra levels. And added to that is the language of color. Added to that is the language of sound. Added to that is the vibration that we evoke as we seriously begin to realize we have a language of light that connects the consciousness of the human with the higher cosmic intelligence of the universe. That divine God spark, or divine God code, is a musical language we're just beginning to understand. Now let's go back, because we were able years ago to work with scientists at Stanford Research Institute, and we put this book together called Mind Dynamics in Space and Time with Elizabeth Rauscher, the most gifted female mathematician in the United States, who wrote more than 400 scientific papers. In the SRI studies in the 1970s and 80s, scientists began to realize through remote viewing, remote sensing, remote communication, there was a higher level of consciousness that could not be explained in scientific terms. But since that time, we have begun to understand, I should say, the inner dynamics of mind and spirit through vibration.
And through consciousness. So I know you work a bit with consciousness too, because that's all connected with soul.
Right, right. And I'm curious, I have so many questions. Who am I kidding? But One question that keeps coming to mind is when we talk about the overself, with this, so you mentioned that this takes into account parallel lives that we might be living or past lives or however we might think of it. So there are many souls that make up the overself, or would those all be one self?
Actually, they're all one self. Yes, correct.
Okay.
So the idea of your over self projects into different places where it can have soul elevation or soul growth would be another term for that. And so, or helping the planet, right? I mean, here you are up there and you see the planet down here and you go, oh, this planet needs some help. What can I do? And, or other people say, when you're in the higher realms, and comes also from near death experiences, if people are into that, you can experience and grow and do more in the physical body than you can in the spiritual body. But the spiritual body does do things because it projects and allows you to do what you need to do wherever you need to do it for your own growth and for the assistance of others.
And this is why so many great musicians, Haydn, Handel, Bach, Mozart, Mendelssohn, Igor Stravinsky from Russia and beyond, all have such unique synthesis of music and spiritual vision in their great oratorios, in their great symphonies, in their great dramas, showing humanity that we have to understand what we've been missing, which is the musical vibratory side of the overself. When we can awaken this, all of us can be instrumentalists in the divine course of the universe. All of us can be cosmic creators. All of us can use greater energy and greater creativity in unique ways.
Right. So we didn't feel we evolved here. And then because we got to be who we are, we acquired a soul or developed our soul, and it's always developing. I'm not saying souls don't evolve. That's exactly what happens. But it didn't come from like these little animalistic things coming up. It came from who we are. And this is actually biblically based as well, because it said, before the fall, Adam and Eve existed. And then because of the fall, they took on garments of skin. And that's kind of what we feel. Even though, we are here now in garments of skin, we still have, and that's one of the things that Dr. Hurtak saw in his experience, we still have that connection to our higher reality. So we're here because the reality we put ourselves into for positive reasons or for negative reasons. One of the chapters, again, in the Overself Awakening book, talks about the metamorphosis. So it sees like ourselves graduating into this understanding of who we truly are, like a butterfly going
from... To put it in biblical language, the changing of garments, the rainbow body.
Going from the caterpillar to the butterfly. And that begins to heal also the dualism, because everything on this planet is dualistic. You can have positive things, you can have negative. We were part of a larger book called Our Moment of Choice, where every moment becomes a moment of choice. I mean, that's what this planet is all about. But again, we don't see it as a limitation. We see it as a soul evolutionary path. And that's what's really exciting about being here. And we are guided. I mean,
this is the moment of graduation. We're being graduated into the fifth dimension. What's the fifth dimension? The ability to work with collective consciousness, the ability to work with those who have graduated beyond physical evolution as ultra-terrestrial beings. When I was taken into the higher dimensions, I saw beings, what I call whole light beings, that were completely in bodies of light that could communicate through higher sound vibrations, that had auras as depicted in ancient Buddhist and Christian art. It suddenly made me realize that the ancients were correct in their artistic forms, but we lost the methodology of being able to personally involve ourselves as musical transformers. So we're given the opportunity, and this is why we're working with Carlos Santana, the late Ellis Coltrane, and other musicians worldwide, because they know we have to raise consciousness through positive vibrations. Otherwise, negative vibrations prevail.
Or I would say through podcasts like what you're doing. I mean, you have to get that message out there. I think, especially for young people, what I find with young people is they're having these experiences, but they have no wisdom behind it. Like, how did I get to do a wedding on another planet? Or, who am I? Why am I there? Here I am. And then they start looking at books, and hopefully they'll look at all the, or listening to podcasts, mostly probably listening to podcasts nowadays.
Yeah.
But, that's exactly where people are at. I'm sure you agree.
Yes, absolutely. And there is this mass awakening, which is very exciting and can be very confusing. You mentioned that, everybody has this oversoul and it's not something that we're kind of developing, but rather something we come in with. Do you find that it's a process of connecting? Is it by default that humans do already have this overself connection? Or is it something, maybe it's both? It's something that we're awakening, that we choose to awaken, that we choose to embody more and more. What's your take?
There's no doubt that when we come here, we get lost, everything goes away. We don't remember who we are.
Usually after the age of 7, the logical side of our parents and society says the paranormal doesn't exist. But to the contrary, we have found just the opposite is true for those who are super sensitive as artists, as poets, as mystical scholars. They realize, wait a minute, there is a connection. We are hardwired to connect with the cosmic mind of the universe.
So one of our chapters actually in this book is called Acknowledging Our Spiritual Essence. So that's like the first thing. We have to acknowledge that there is more. And that's so important for these young kids now that have never been raised in any concept beyond this planetary system. Please know there is so much more. You've experienced it here, I know, in terms of your own consciousness experiences, but it's acknowledging our spiritual essence and acknowledging our physical body is not the end of who we are. And that's why it's so important to realize that we're here for a reason. I say there's 8 billion people on this planet because this planet's going to go through some significant changes, as well as what we sometimes talk about, first contact, even with other species.
Cosmic cultures.
That exist in the universe.
And one thing we have in common is vibrations. Cosmic vibrations can be gravitational waves. They can be bioenergetic waveforms. We're scientists. We're also musicologists. We work with the best scientists and musicians in the world, the upper 1%. And this is why we have a plethora of books, one of which was #1 on Amazon just a couple years ago, was called Sound. This goes into all of the work we did in Egypt, where we used, under the permission of the Department of Antiquities, musical sounds, some of them simply produced by the human voice, my voice, which allowed acoustical vibrations of such intensity as you see here in the Grand Gallery of the Great Pyramid, that golden waveforms were generated and moved up and down the interior of the Great Pyramid as standing columnar waves. So, what produces this type of energy? Well, the sacred geometries of the pyramids allow these energy forms to collect and suddenly burst into energy explosions.
Right. So we recently went to a Tibetan center nearby where we live here. And basically the monks were vibrating, and you could just feel that throughout your body. But it really does more. It even opens the heavens. And, I know you have one of our CDs. We have done many meditations. The one you mentioned is really the sacred ciphers of the Divine Mother. And we went through the Divine Mother names throughout
the cultures of the world. We went around the world to get samples and show it's the feminine vibration more than the masculine that opens the heart. Without opening the heart, we just have intellectual music. The heart, mind, and soul go together. And this is the key understanding of the soul. The nephesh, as is called in ancient Hebrew. The soul becomes now the higher soul, the ruach, with vibration, and that becomes still higher, the neshama, the soul spirit in unity. So it's this higher connection of people of all backgrounds, all traditions, all religious philosophies understand is the common ingredient that we share a language, a musical and vibratory experience.
So I think you have to see us as radiating energy. And if you're depressed, if you're negative, you're radiating, almost like this dark energy. But if you can sing, if you can vibrate on higher dimensions, then you're radiating a positive energy. And when we start realizing that we are not alone in the universe, then you realize that those energies are going out. So they're going out to our overself body, but it's not exclusively that. It's going out to other people's overself bodies, it's going out to cosmic dimensions, it's going out to extraterrestrials and what we call extra celestials, which are beings without physical bodies that are also here to help and guide us. And I mentioned calling upon Michael, that's what we would call an ultra terrestrial. And when you put that vibration out, you're actually calling in that energy that can protect you and can watch over you. So these are all, who we are. The fact is, the physical body is not the be all and end all. It's not the end to who we are. The soul itself, and this is of course your major topic, the soul itself is, does come in as long as we're alive. Part of that soul, we would say, is in the physical body. Part of it is in other realities. So when you leave your physical body, it goes back to kind of its essence or its source of emanation. We would say that. But it's very important. I want to emphasize to be here now, because this planet, it's so important to be here to do what we can to help to make the changes that need to be made in a positive way. And people who think, oh, well, I just don't like it anymore, I'm going to get off of here. That's a problem, because you will end up coming back in another situation you probably don't want to be in. And I just want to make that emphasis.
So besides what Desiree is saying, you need to visualize. You need to visualize, because this is not an easy situation at first, because ideas come and go very quickly. This is why we have put together the books that have these pictures called cosmograms. So
this is part of our Overself Awakening.
We take you
book.
to stage 2 is when we recognize that beyond the cloud that covers our nature, we have within us what is called by paraphysicists and psychologists the avatar potential.
Or which is really our consciousness body. It's a connection between our physical being, which you can hardly see there, I'll bring it close for a second, and our consciousness body to our overself. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect who we are here with who we really are here.
And that's the consciousness body there. Is that the tree of life that you've got there depicted?
Well, actually, it's more the chakras. The tree, basically, the consciousness body is just a blue body with stars, because it's kind of etheric energy connections.
At the bottom, there are the 7 chakras or energy fields that have to be collected and used to open up the cosmic potential.
We do.
That is the initiation.
I'll put it higher up. We do agree with the fact that there is a tree of life, and we do talk about it. But the circles that you see around are actually more of a matrix.
Oh, okay.
And I like the concept.
Some would call them
matrix.
The orbs that you see in sacred areas, or after sacred music is used. And then you see the face mask has been removed from the female nature within ourselves.
When the eyes are
eyes are opened,
and later the face mask gets removed.
and the jewel of the heart begins to vibrate.
And this is preparing for the day of graduation. But before we get there, we have to realize that the heavens opened first for us. So you don't need to leave this planet to connect. That's the whole thing that we're also trying to say. You are here now, and you can be consciously in other states of higher realms simultaneously. You can get that information, so you know things that are going to happen in the future. This is so important. We do remote viewing, but remote viewing is not based just on time. It also can connect to future events, so people are aware what's going to happen in the future, because some of that is there. I won't say you could tell 20 years from now, because there still is free will, but you can usually, I've told 6 months and even 9 months from now what will happen in my environment, and it's come true. So you probably done. What are some of your experiences?
Well, I do want to share what I was telling you before we started recording, because you've mentioned about the protection, and you've mentioned just about the consciousness and our awareness, how we're here in the physical, but we're other places too. And, we've been in this within the window of the past 72 hours of our recording. So my connection with you directly, I was a couple of nights ago, I was watching some interviews of you both, and my third eye was going crazy. It was just vibrating. I mean, it was so tangibly vibrating, and I was enjoying that and noticing it. And I went to bed that night, and in the middle of the night, I had an astral experience. It came through as a dream. But as I mentioned to you, it was really more of a nightmare. It was very frightening, and I can't remember the details of it. There was some artifact or something. There was something that I was sure I would remember. Don't forget this part. And of course, I didn't write it down and I forgot. But I was under attack in kind of a subtle way. It wasn't like somebody was coming at me with a weapon or anything, but there was an energetic attack. And right before I woke up, I was with you two, and your arms got very big and long, particularly long, but they very quickly came and shielded me. And but they were more long than wide, but somehow they covered all of me. And then I woke up and I was in this fear state because I still felt that there was a presence. I was so relieved to be awake, but I still felt a presence and I was still in fear. And I could feel my energy, how low my energy was in that fear. And I was physically choosing moment to moment to raise my energy, raise, or, you just release this fear. And I knew I couldn't hold that fear and raise my energy. So I was having to make this choice, like, okay, I know that I'm afraid, but I'm not, I am love. I am, um, and the reason that I'm so convinced that this was an astral experience and not just a dream is because with my physical eyes open, the room was pulsing with light at regular intervals. And it was my physical eyes, but it was, not something that if somebody else had been there with me, I know that they wouldn't have seen this. This has happened other times to me as well. But so that protective element, the connection with you two, us being in this window of time where we're connecting in this reality, all of those things to me are poignant. And I still have a lot of unanswered questions about that experience personally within me, but it has my attention. And was there something that you wanted to say?
No, I was going to say, I think a lot of people are going through the same thing. I think we were saying, because the planet is making people fearful. And that's the last thing you should do.
We were just in Bosnia in Europe praying for peace in the Middle East. And Desiree earlier has used the expression Michael, or in the ancient biblical pre-Semitic, Mikaelu is the term that's used for Michael, the protective angel. It's interesting. You're going back thousands of years to all of the major cultures of the Middle East knew there were angels. We would call them ultra-terrestrial beings. And with the use of certain mantras, the mind could be schooled, the body could be protected, and these events did take place. And so we're coming into a scientific realization, a new psychology, a new consciousness cosmology, that spiritual mantras, musical expressions of joy, purpose, and protection do work if they're used properly. So I'd like to intone, with your permission, the name of Michael, as it was originally used, according to scholars like David Noel Friedman from the University of Chicago, dealing with ancient manuscripts that were found in Syria, of the protected nature, we will call, of our spiritual guides, those who will work with us in dreams, in higher states of consciousness, and in scientific realities we have yet to fully appreciate.
Well, let me just say before he does that the fear base is what blocks people from moving forward. So what you experience is exactly what everyone should experience, in the sense that going from no longer being in fear, but knowing to elevate, to move forward, to be spiritual, to connect. And once you do that, then you're able to be more functional on the planet. If you're in fear, then everything is, negative, and you're not, that's where your whole mind and consciousness is absorbed into that. So it's actually a really great experience to see the duality that we live in, but how not to be in the negative side of that duality, but the positive side, which is the light. And you did the exercise. It's like an exercise. You did like an exercise.
Yeah.
So
and
with your permission.
Yes, please.
I'll say 3 times, or chant it 3 times. The word is Michael, or Mikaelu. Mikaelu, Mikaelu, Mikaelu. Sounds of and by themselves, with visualization, with divine intention, with musical training, provide the body nourishment and soul food that's necessary. And thus we understand, for example, Psalm 139 of King David in the Old Testament, he writes, "Where shall I go from your spirit? If I ascend to the heavens, you will be there. If I take my place of residence in the lower dimensions of earth, you will be there also." It's a recognition that there is an ascension process of the higher mind, we call the overself, the collective consciousness field. And this is what we're exploring now with new books, new studies that we've done at Stanford Research Institute, our Academy for Future Science, and working with spiritual leaders of the indigenous community in North and South America and Africa, realizing that we're at a point of the quote unquote, the gathering of the tribes, where people of all backgrounds have realized something's wrong with the politics of the earth, something's wrong with the old three-dimensional science that does not have love and joy, and that we need to shift to another dimensional understanding.
And, people say to us all the time, well, what do you think is going to happen on the planet? Are we going to like end it all or whatever? We say it's up to all of us. I mean, we actually have input into the consciousness field. And if we want to be in fear and anger and all that stuff, then the field's going to go into, fear and anger and probably destruction. If we can shift that field, and that's part of it, to connecting with who we really are, we can actually change the consciousness to one of peace, love, and joy. And in that book, Mind Dynamics, that we showed you earlier, in the 1970s, we worked with a famous parapsychologist named Dr. Andreu Puharj. He brought Uri Geller to this country, and we were working with him. He was in the Middle East. We were at his place in Ossining, New York at the time in the 70s, doing prayers for peace. This is during the Kissinger shuttle diplomacy.
That didn't work.
Well, no, it did. In the long run, there was no war. So, I mean, the thing is that one of the things we actually do with our energies is to put out prayers for peace. And in addition to that, we've done it for fires. We were in a certain town and there were fires nearby. People were ready, set, go. And the town was on set, ready to go. And we collectively, never individually, we like to get as many people as we can, literally brought rain to put up the fires. So these are things that you can physically, spiritually do. We are emissaries of light on the planet. And if we get into that fear base, we're not going to be able to use our energies in the way we need to. And
going back, though, to your earlier concept of Kissinger's diplomacy didn't work. That's why we were called into action.
Okay.
And we were called into action by members who had worked in the cabinet of the late President Kennedy. So we're working with the top of the top. And the reason why is because we were given this gift of spiritual vibration and spiritual vision to make an intercession work that did not work politically, and it did work spiritually and paraphysically. So that's the bottom line. We're at a point now of going beyond what I will call the same old game of the left side of the brain, the male side of the brain that wants to make compromises and make situations work that do not work. And we need people to use the other side of the brain with the left side of the brain, the right side, the female nature, the compassion nature in music and sound. This is important.
And when we do, then we'll come up with another chapter. This is actually chapter 22. And again, there's 72 chapters. And this is called The Mind Moves into Divine Union. I'm going to put it a little bit further up. I hope it's still coming in sharp. So we start using sacred names. We start energizing our chakras. And we start really connecting more and more with our higher self.
You see a vibratory field of sacred language at the bottom. And then on the left hand, the right hand, you see the master traditions of the West and the East coming together. In other words, the higher synthesis.
Yes, and so we start getting insights. We can get insights from our overself, but a lot of people also get insights from their spiritual guides. And that's
the higher feminine nature, however, that pulls them together. Why? Because there's not that competition between two male minds working. No, there's the marriage. And then we move on. And this, of course, is illustrated in every chapter in great detail.
And one of the gifts is to energize the gifts of the Holy Spirit, so people really can do prophecy, so they really can understand, the angelic realms. And I think this is happening. We say, and Dr. Hurtak said this in 1973 in the Keys of Enoch, that some people are going to be on this upward spiral, literally transforming themselves into, light consciousness. Others, sadly, will go into a darkness, into a downward spiral. And we're trying to show people how to not do that, how to awaken to their true higher potential. Everyone has the potential to know, to understand, to come into that greater awareness. Now, think about it. If you have a higher self, and that higher self is in another realm, it has a greater knowledge, a greater wisdom, and it can prepare you. I'm sure, have you ever had, Kara, I know many people have, like points of like protection, like don't go down that road, you're going to have an accident, or get out of the car now, or do whatever needs to be done. People are using it for even during COVID, what pump to pump your handle with. There's
Oh,
so
wow.
ways. But anyway, and
Yeah. Yes, I have had that. One example that comes to mind is when my daughter was a newborn and I was just getting into my van. I was in an urban area and I needed to feed her and I needed to get her out of the car seat. And my bag was kind of right there at the door. I was kind of between me and my bag. And as I grabbed her out of the seat and turned around, there was somebody who immediately was very close to me, had just walked right up to me. And then as soon as I turned around, just walked right off, like back up on the sidewalk. It was very unusual at the time. And I was like, why did he come off of the sidewalk so close to my car and then get back on the sidewalk? And as the pieces kind of came together, I was like, oh, he was going for something. And at just the right moment, everything just kind of came together. But it felt like time was very, very slow and dilated as that happened. And it was a non-issue, but it was so bizarre that it was like, wow, something just happened and all the pieces just came together exactly when they needed to for him to make a new decision on a dime. And I'll never know for what reason he was so close, but yeah, it was very strange.
Yeah, people mostly see it in car situations or whatever,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, and really we have that divine protection, and there are beings watching over us at all times. We got to listen. I mean, I think that's the main thing. I know we have some friends recently had it. You got to listen to that higher self. In that case, you were just at the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, and you knew, that was your process. But sometimes people get these insights and then they ignore it, and then
Right.
they get hit, hurt, or whatever. And it's so important to realize that it's not just you. There's a whole team, if I can put it that way, around you and your higher self that's trying to give you insights, that's trying to help you, that's trying to direct you, that's trying to explain things to you. And
Right.
even social things, like you may see someone and you don't really know who he is, but you get this weird feeling, and
This is why our pictures are so unique, is because they orientate your eye to think and see in Technicolor. And when you can do that, let's show the picture of the light burst over the head of the mind. That's then takes the next stage, which is the brilliant light, the outpouring, what I call the outshining of light that happens when we have spiritual
So
self-realization.
he's just saying that higher self, when we connect, starts opening, and you start seeing not only the eyes open, but the veil's gone, the higher consciousness is there, and we start seeing.
And now the body
being,
becomes holistically connected with the light, and you see now the three sacred birds, the dove for ascension, the phoenix bird for rebirth, the concept of the eagle for contact with the divine hierarchies, all these sacred symbols. And then, as you see on one side, I'm pointed to the ancient temples in Chichen Itza and Palenque in Mexico. Areas of initiation come into view. So historic anthropology, archaeology, culture, history reinforces the fact that these are areas that we can still go to in our prayers. And this is why we went to Medjugorje in Bosnia to pray.
You also see us as being like activated with a pyramid of capstone over our heads. We're no longer, just with our feet on the ground, even though that's a positive thing. But we start evolving into higher beings of energy.
So it's the synthesis of sacred geometry, thinking in color, using sacred mantras or linguistic concepts as a new language. And then finally, the higher music, the tonality that allows all of the chakras, all of the connections that we need with other people like ourselves. And therefore, small groups of people can do miracles together if they work together, as we have demonstrated in some of our books and experiments. What does this mean? It means that we're being prepared for ascension. It means we are beginning to prepare our body, mind, and spirit to work together as a triad. We're beginning to understand the fuller meaning behind all of these ancient archetypal pictures is something that is not ancient, but is eternal, because that is the way the cosmic intelligence works through mental pictures.
So I like the term ascension, but I also like the term reconnection. In fact, Eric Pearl, who did the reconnection, had read our book. He's of Enoch, and he understood that. So he was saying that to do the healing that he was processing, he still is. Of course, if you look at the reconnection, so you have your higher body, which is this perfect body, all the cells of your body, everything is just perfect. And then you come down here, and after 30, 40, 50 years, your cells start getting corrupted after 5Gs and everything else that's going on. So, you know, his work was to reconnect the physical body to that higher self body that was perfectly blueprinted, perfectly energized.
Now, historically, people were taught in the West not to think of themselves as being worthy of this higher teaching of the light body. But if you read scripture correctly, and I do because I'm a specialist in ancient languages and in biblical archaeology, it's clear that one of the central symbols in Egypt was the coat of many colors Jacob gave Joseph before he went into Egypt, which is the understanding of his light body of multiple levels. In the New Testament, putting on the mind of Christ in the concept of the rainbow vision, the coming of the divine hierarchy also illustrates a color spectrum that we can go into that gives us a greater compassion, a greater understanding of the universal truths that are behind these ancient symbols, which again become modernized and transformed into our daily experience of joy and purpose.
Yeah, nevertheless, continuing on with, and again, there's 72 chapters, this is 49. So one of the things we take people through is all the different sacred places on this planet. We've done this. In fact, we're well known for our work in both Mexico and Egypt. We were one of the discoverers of what's called the Osiris shaft, the Osiris tomb. But every one of these sacred places is a sacred area. And the planet, like we have acupuncture points in our physical body, Dr. Hurtak was shown in the Keys of Enoch that the planet has its own acupuncture points, or we'll say grid points, vortex points that are being energized at this time to prepare it really to connect with its own higher presence. So it's not just us, there's actually the planetary system, Mother Earth, Gaia, is connecting with a higher vibratory system as well.
To say it simply, on the cover of our book, we have the return of the dove, the sign of the Holy Spirit, or the spiritual communication with cosmic language. On 7 levels, the 7 seals, the 7 chakras, as radiations of light, which we collect with our hands. In other words, we're able to mobilize and to actually participate with the gathering of the sparks and the application of these sparks as we modulate our body, mind, and spirit to work in unity with others of the light. So this is why our work is so important, because it's illustrated where people can meditate like the Tibetan monks or like the early Christian monks and mystics, or even those down through the centuries have used the Greek icons, sacred pictures, to remind the mind that evolution doesn't stop with Mother Earth. The mind and the humanity of Mother Earth is connected with the humanity of the cosmic creation story.
And Dr. Hurtak was shown, like, in addition to Michael, there's also, which is illustrated here and mentioned in the Keys, Melchizedek. And I know many people have heard about Melchizedek. He's actually one of the ones who blessed Abraham and the seed to continue on the planet. He supposedly, interesting enough, was motherless and fatherless. This is written in the Bible, although not all traditions accept that. So he was here, he was king of Salem, which means peace, and Abraham could shake his hand or get a blessing from him.
And he received, that is, Abraham received the blessing of the covenant that ultimately his offspring would inherit the stars. So we're reaching a point in our space program where Earth humanity is taking its baby steps into space. We're beginning to join the cosmic cultures of this. So I want to pronounce this, sing this name.
Okay, that's what I was saying. Yeah, go ahead.
Give me
3
times. The word Melchizedek or Melchizedek is the central term for the spiritual initiation process. Melchizedek, Melchizedek, Melchizedek. if you dwell on some of these sacred pronouncements or sacred expressions, your body will be energized in a very profound way. Your whole chemistry will be realigned with quavers of joy and purpose and understanding. You'll realize your body is the temple of divine or Holy Spirit. You will become holistically connected with your cosmic potential, your spiritual potential, higher psychology, the world culture. Suddenly we realize we're here as citizens. We're here also as cosmic citizens. We're here to help heal, to open doorways of understanding, to show compassion, and to overcome the mind games of only one side of the brain, only science that's object-oriented rather than human-oriented, theology which is only for the few rather than for the many through the Holy Spirit. So we begin to wake up to our cosmic potential.
And we know many people have gone to some of the sacred areas like the Great Pyramid, and they feel that they're trying to get their own initiation. But in actuality, when you do certain prayers at these places, you're also reactivating and reconnecting these sacred areas as well. So Kara, say a little bit more about some of the work. Have you gone to any place? I know you.
Well, I've not been to Egypt yet, but I've been to Sedona many times. That's where I've got to meet you both in person. I have been to Chichen Itza, and there's another temple site more on the Yucatan, and I forget what it's called, but I went there a couple years ago. But you have some beautiful work available in terms of the musical side, where you've got these mantras and they've got this amazing backing, musical backing to them. How can people use the what you're sharing in terms of the mantras and the sacred words and what you have available for people to listen to? Is it best for people to use their own voices and to repeat the mantras? Is it, a lot of times I listen to your work in the car, and so I'm not necessarily in a meditative state, but I just want that energy around. I want it to build up around me. And how can people use this to reconnect themselves?
Well, first of all, our main website, you'll probably say it anyway later, is keysofenoch.org. And in addition to a bunch of music, some of which is now on Spotify and Apple iTunes under Keys of Enoch, Spotify under our names, Doctors Hurtak. I believe it's something with that. Basically, we also have 3 volumes of books. One is called The Names of the Divine Father, which 72 names of God, mostly connected from the Hebrew, but also some other traditions. Then 72 names of the Mother, and we do everything from Pachamama to, we'll say Kuan Yin, to also Egyptian names and other types of names. And then finally, we just recently came out with the 76 names of basically, and those are all biblically based.
And illustrated. That's so important. These names are illustrated so the mind can overcome the analytical side by seeing the holistic picture of how this fits into the greater story.
So both, we highly encourage people to listen to our
their own
and chant and sing. A lot of people, of course, when they listen to music, they do chant and sing with it.
Study groups you might be interested in, but largely it's self-motivation. One has to choose to be chosen, has to take, or one's inner nature has to take the higher path.
And we like to think that people are, we don't want to get people into ritual, where you say this, this way, and then you have to say these words around it. It really has to come from your heart, has to vibrate, because, some of these names are used for protection. And if you're, not knowing how to use them or why you're using them, it becomes a sacred language. That's what we're hoping. And again, with Over Self-Awakening, the reason why we did this is in each chapter, and there's 72 again, that there is a meditation and a visualization. Just opening up a book, like you can see, this one has the Ein Sof Or, which means the limitless light. And that's a Hebrew expression, but it means like there's no limitation. In other words, we're not stuck here. There's no divisions. Technically, we're all part of a higher consciousness field.
And there's many different types of light, just like there's different types of humanity. But ultimately, we come into the awareness that we have this higher or over self that has to be awakened.
So before I would like to do a little bit more in terms of the mantras, but let's just finish a few other aspects to what happens in the end of the book before we wrap this up. So this is a 65, almost to 72. It says the space-time overlap touches all souls. So you can see that in addition to all the areas being activated,
sacred areas,
you become part of this higher activation. So you are part of your higher consciousness awakening from your work and from your energies that you have done.
It's the divine mother within us, the divine feminine principle within us that opens us up. So no matter where we go in the world, we find a resonance that can bring people together into harmony, light, higher wisdom, and higher peace.
And then finally, at the end, actually, it is the cosmic DNA wave reborn, because we feel that we actually came from a higher code structure. I know people like Greg Braden have talked about this, but Dr. Hurtak has this in the Keys of Enoch, that the name Yod He Vod He, which is on the cover of the book, but also in key 202, is a divine code structure. So
his new work follows the work that he historically recognizes began in 1973 with my experience of actually hearing the pronunciation of the divine name of the universe.
But also to show how the nucleobasis, which Dr. Jack wrote about, actually is coded from this divine code structure. And it's in groups of 3 that the nucleobases then code for all the amino acids in our body. So this is something he talked about. So really what we do and what the Keys of Enoch are all about is to turn the tree of life upside down. Instead of saying, you know, our roots are in the earth and we're going up. Yes, we honor Gaia, Mother Earth. There's no doubt. We're living upon her. We're not taking very good care of her. That's a different lecture podcast. But ultimately, our roots are really in the heavens, and the physical body came from the heavens and is existing now here. And we need to develop who we truly are while we're here.
So you're speaking now of turning the tree upside down in terms of spiritual metaphor.
Well, no, I mean,
reaching up from the roots of consciousness to a higher language of light into our overself, and then even to a much higher level of creation.
But actually, everything is consciousness, and our consciousness, we believe, has a higher connection. And so does our genes, our DNA has a divine code structure.
And we've seen this in the miracles that we've been participating in with people of different cultures and backgrounds, who began to understand the concept of the global Pentecost, that we all could reach a point of such exuberance and light and music that suddenly we feel an initiation takes place.
Right. And when that takes place, basically we have the final one, the 72, which is picture of 3 beings. It's called the triumph of the divine image. And these 3 beings are connected with Jesus, also with Melchizedek, but also Metatron, the other M that we mentioned earlier, but we haven't really focused on. And basically, Dr. Jack was shown that Michael, as we initially mentioned, for protection, Melchizedek for anointing, blessing. He was really a priest who was able to bless and anoint all of us. You know, it didn't just happen 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. Melchizedek is still with us. He didn't die. He was motherless and fatherless. He certainly didn't die. Anyway, and then also Metatron, who is connected with what we also call El Shaddai.
So Desiree is pronouncing this term Melchizedek with the female vibration, which is the restoration of Melchizedek. The understanding that we are going into a new phase of contact. And this is very important because we must discern between the extraterrestrial, the extracelestial, and the ultra-terrestrial, which means we have to prepare ourselves musically with a better psychology, theologically with a better understanding, a revelatory understanding that we are part of an ongoing process that doesn't stop with Mother Earth, and scientifically with an understanding. We do have the scientific texts that show that even skeptical scientists can change their minds and become aware that mind over matter does work, that there's a whole connection that we have with collective cosmic intelligence.
But talk a little bit about Metatron now as the third.
Well, Metatron, the angel closest to the throne, that's a Greek expression. Metatronus, closest to the throne of the divine source. In Hebrew, it's Shaddai, which means now the God of wisdom and the higher power that's implanted within humanity that wants to take a higher step, a higher initiation.
So when Dr. Hurtak had his initial experience, Enoch connected with him, but a lot of people think Enoch and Metatron are the same, but in a sense, they are emanations. A lot of beings are kind of emanating connections, like their family groupings as well. So Enoch is connected with Metatron, not the same as Metatron in that sense, but Metatron took him in the higher realms because he had that ability to go even into higher and higher dimensions. So let's use that expression. We'll change it from Metatron, which is the Greek, to El Shaddai, which is the Hebrew. And we'll close with this vibration. The Sheen also is like for the Shekinah, for the Holy Spirit. So it's a powerful vibration to say Shaddai in the Hebrew.
So again, 3 times, close your eyes, feel the light coming down, encompassing your body. Feel the joy of being raised up, recognizing that there is a divine family that awaits our teaching, our self-realization, our heartbeat of compassion. El Shaddai, El Shaddai, El Shaddai. May we be blessed. And may we study in joy, and may we overcome negativity by thinking of the higher path, taking the higher path, and vibrating the higher path for all those who suffer in dualism, in the darkness of the old teaching. Let the light of the Divine Father, the Divine Mother, the Divine Christ be with us.
And let us feel our higher self connecting with us, and let us open our 8th chakra, not just the 7th, which is the Kether, the crown, but the 8th chakra, to that higher reality that is with us at all times. Let us acknowledge that greater power that protects us, guides us, and loves us as well.
Pray for peace in the Middle East. Pray for peace in the Far East. Pray for peace in East Europe. Pray for peace in East Africa.
And pray for peace also within us, because the more peace and love and joy we radiate, the more the energies around us also transform.
And if you so desire, be participating in our library of music. We've got close to 70 albums from singers throughout the world, gifted singers who use these sacred mantras, use them to fill your life and experience a new life with joy and inner happiness. Be not deceived by those who want material, political peace without the true peace of the inner heart. Seek the eternal peace of divine spirit.
Thank you, Kara, for having us on your program. I hope you have many other great guests.
And enjoy the rest of that series of books that you're connected with, called Actually,
it's the 400 series. You have 407, because the Keys of Enoch had 54 Keys of Enoch. There was really 64. So the last 400 series is in these individual books. They're all on our website.
The new one, Thou Shall Be the Covenant.
Yeah, they're all on our website, keysofenoch.org. So
Beautiful.
Thank you all.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you both to be here. Bless you for all of your work. Thank you very much.
Thank all of you listening to the program. God loves you, and so do we. The experience of life is just beginning. A new page of the biological book of life is changing now. We are beginning to realize we are ultimately spiritual beings in human form, reclaiming our cosmic heritage. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Soul Elevation. If someone in your life would be inspired or uplifted by what you heard today, please take a moment and share it with them. These are the kinds of conversations that ripple out and elevate collective consciousness. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the powerful episodes ahead. Your presence, your energy, your support truly help amplify this mission of raising frequency and anchoring in a more awakened humanity. Thank you for your support. And I'll see you for the next episode of Soul Elevation.